Yeah, welcome to another episode of the Racer X Exhaust Podcast, brought to you by Yoshimura, the official exhaust system for the now three-time World Motocross Champion Tim Geiser. MX2 won that title once. He has now won his second MXGP title on a Honda 450, and Yoshimura shod each of those championship runs. And also I get to brag to my old partner on the Racer X website, Chase Stallo, who told me when Jeffrey Hurlings went down with injury, there is no way Antonio Caroli does not win the title this year. Well, Caroli went down with injury. Geiser and the Honda team made some big gains this year. If you listen to Chris Kiefer, who does a lot of podcasts over with Mathis on the technical side, he says that works Honda. They changed some things, and you could see how much better the bike was at midseason. Geiser started challenging Caroli, then Caroli got hurt. Geiser is the champion. Chase also told me there is no way Jared Mees does not win the American Flat Track Championship. Well, Briar Bauman has Mees on the ropes. Mees is running out of races to run Bauman down. Bauman aiming for his first ever AFT championship. That'll be fun to watch down the stretch. As for this episode of the show, go to yoshimura-rd.com. Get yourself an exhaust system, kind of like what Geiser has. You could even get the Works Edition Honda, which comes with a special exhaust header and mufflers from Yoshimura. It'll look just like Tim's. Today's episode of the show, this is something I've wanted to do for a long time. I have dabbled in covering other motorsports here and there. 2014, 2015, I did a lot of NASCAR stuff for NBCSN at various levels, including some of the feeder series, getting into the sport, and then even a few things at the top level. And I follow it all because you never know when the phone call is going to come and they're going to need me to fill in, and I'll get paid to announce something besides dirt bikes or ATVs. So I'm always ready and I'm always following it. It is a massive difference in how these sports work. And it especially rings home true to me when, after a week at Loretta Lynn's, I hear all these people say, the sport's now all about money. Motocross, just money. It's about money. These four-strokes, they're so expensive. Dude, it might be more expensive than it was, but compared to any other motorsport, it is not about money in motocross. It's not even close. You literally have no chance, no shot whatsoever in high-end four-wheeled car racing motorsports if you are unable to bring millions of dollars to the table. Either your family's rich or you find a sponsor that's willing to bankroll your efforts. That's literally how it works. Motocross ain't even close. And in addition, remember, in motocross, talent still wins out. If you do not have the best bike, but you're a good rider and you work hard, there's a good chance you might impress enough to get the good bike. In car racing, if you can't get in the good car in the first place, it's very hard to show how talented you are because the car makes such a difference. So I've always wanted to illustrate that, and also really just to shine a light on how other motorsports work. How do you come through the ranks? How do you make it in car racing? We know how it works in this sport. You've got the amateur majors, the big amateur races. You have your local tracks, Supercross Futures, obviously all culminating with Loretta Lynn's, the national championship. That's a pretty obvious pathway. So who better to explain this than my broadcast colleague for the American Flat Track Series, AJ Allmendinger, one of the most versatile car racers in America. He has won a NASCAR Cup race at the very top level. He has won IndyCar races at the top level. He's won the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona, so as a sports car road race driver at the very top level. AJ, though, is a motorcycle fan through and through. You will hear in this podcast, he likes motocross and supercross better than any other motorsport. And he follows it, and he's always drilling me for information because he just loves it. And we also get to work together on flat tracks, so he knows a thing or two about that this season. It's been really fun working with AJ. So after last night, Wednesday night in Charlotte at the NASCAR Hall of Fame building, that's where we actually record the announcing for the flat track shows, we went out. We bench raced about motocross and motorsports and how it all works, and I recorded it. So enjoy this conversation with myself and AJ Allmendinger, and I think you're going to learn a thing or two. This is really one of the podcasts I'm most proud of. I've wanted to tackle this topic. I haven't heard anyone tackle this topic. It's been on my list. I thank AJ for the time. You're going to enjoy it. Okay, so first of all, I'm amazed the 14 series you have to cover.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily required right now to know a ton about motocross. You got to maybe hit it every once in a while on the Motorsports Hour, but you're actually still interested. You add like a 15 series that you don't even have to do because you told me I actually like it though.
It's my passion. That's my passion. I started BMX bicycle racing. I happened to. That's what I started on.
Yeah.
It ended up the way it actually started was my dad raced these things called Odysseys, which are like somewhat So he ran them on dirt ovals.
Okay.
And we were at a dad's race every weekend, and I was 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, well, maybe it's time to get AJ racing something as well.
Yeah.
And they would have quad runner races at these races as well.
On the oval
as well. So it was like, well, that seems pretty simple. We're already there.
Yeah.
And really, the week before we were probably going to get one, my mom, well, we all watched this 5-6-year-old kid. He bicycled and hit his head against the wall, and it paralyzed him.
Gotcha.
And my mom was like, nope, that ain't it. So what else are we going to get him? And we happened to be at I think it was a hobby, I'm sad that I still know this, a D&J hobby shop.
Oh, you should know this. This is a life-changing moment, dude.
5 years old.
Yeah.
Walking through, and there was this flyer for BMX bike racing at this place called Moffett Field. It was an old Air Force base.
Okay.
I was always on my bike. Hey, perfect. Let's go do that. And I loved it.
Yeah.
And because of that, I loved Supercross racing. I loved motocross racing. At the time, it would be like ESPN2.
Yeah.
And it would come on, and I just remember watching. Really, my first guy that I really liked was Ricky Johnson.
Okay. You must have been pretty young.
Yeah.
Your
So
age,
I was like,
RJ.
Yeah, I was 5 or 6 years old.
Damn.
And so it was Ricky Johnson, Jeff Ward, all those guys, and it just never left me. I just loved, it was Ricky Johnson, and then
McGrath.
Jeff Stanton, really.
Oh yeah. After that.
It's not a big Sean Michelle Bale fan. I was not.
Nobody was.
Yeah.
Nobody was.
McGrath, but LaRocco, those types of guys. I always wanted Guy Cooper to get a win. He never did.
Dude, you nailed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but no, I wanted to become. That was my destiny. I was like, okay, I'm 5. Raced BMX bikes for 3 years. Said, okay, I'm ready for a motorcycle. It's time to do this. I felt like I was a pretty badass on the BMX bike, and my mom was like, yeah, no, you're not getting on a motorcycle to race. No, that's not gonna happen.
Do you remember that quad guy?
Yeah, it was quarter midgets instead. Yeah.
Okay, so that's awesome. So for most people listening to this on Racer X, they'd be like, what? People grow up driving race cars? You can grow up driving a race car just like you can ride a 50 or a 65 in motocross. You can do it at what age?
Well, yeah, there is a pathway, but it's different than motorcycle racing where it's just motorcycle racing. Yeah, obviously there's different types of motorcycle racing.
Yeah.
There's Supercross and motocross. There's flat track.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's MotoGP and Superbike, and we see crossover with the Haydens and so many different. You see Valentino Rossi all the time on his flat track bike, and Marquez and all those guys. But they're still motorcycles.
I know what you mean. If you want to be a motocross racer, you race motocross. It's cars. It's a little less defined as what's like the right way.
Yeah, and there's just so many different forms of car racing, and I've been very fortunate in my career to have such a background. But to say, in IndyCar racing and open wheel racing, it is fairly standard that you race go-karts.
Okay.
And you just go-karts to whatever the junior formula of open wheel racing is, on up through the ranks. Stock car racing, it's a little bit more wide open because there's so many different things. There's late models. There's these things called bandoleros. Yep. I mean, heck, I was an IndyCar guy that went over stock car racing. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, there's no set in stone. It's not like you go out to Loretta Lynn's and like, if I'm pretty awesome there, somebody's probably going to recognize this, and one of the manufacturers are going to come over and want me to ride for them. It's not the same.
Yeah, so it's possible to be like really good in whatever it is, and that doesn't necessarily get you the ride, or you don't even get looked at, because maybe they're looking at a totally different series or totally different type of racing that day.
And in my love of Supercross and motocross riding, I don't know all the ins and outs of how difficult it is when it comes to sponsorship, but that's the problem in car racing, is the fact that there's so many different ways of racing, and it's so expensive for a family. The fact is that I've seen some of the most talented people ever really never get a great opportunity. There was this guy in Northern California. He was a god named Mamo Gidley.
Okay.
And now he did get the chance to race some IndyCars. He got a couple of rides here and there, but he was phenomenal, but never had any money and just never got the right opportunity to be long-term in open-wheel racing. And that's really what it is nowadays, especially nowadays with where sponsorship is there's so much talent out there with not a lot of money. And unless you got a lot of money behind you, it's hard to get your name out there.
Nachos have come to the table.
That's right.
You nailed it. Yeah, that's what I try to explain to people. Like, motocross has one major downside: the injuries, the danger. Your mom saw a dude flip a quad into a wall, done.
Yeah.
And that's going to turn a lot of people off. But the money part is important. But if you're really good, even without money, you don't have enough to buy a dirt bike. You can't be dirt poor. But you don't need $1 million to make it. Car racing. Okay, I covered K&N for a couple years. Gray Galding, who's kind of working his way up a little bit. His dad told me at every race they drove to, every semi they saw on the road, they would write down the name, Google it, figure out the name of the company. They're like, if we make 300 phone calls a year and we get one bite, that's what it's going to take.
And that's and that's really what it is. And you know, I didn't really go to college. I went to college for one semester because I had talked to, at that point when I was obviously 17, 18 years old, talked to everybody in the sport, and I said, what's the most important thing that I need to know?
Okay.
And they said, public speaking and marketing. And I said, okay. Well, I'm going to take and I'd planned to stay in college longer, but fortunate enough at that point, my race career just started picking up.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, well, if I take these classes and get the gist of it, will I learn more at the racetrack than I will in college? And they said, yep. But you need to have the gist of it. And that's what I tell kids nowadays, and it's tough. You go to go-kart races, and families are like,
oh, here we go. They're going to be all
what is the way to get our son or daughter to the big times? And I said,
of course that's what they ask.
And the sad thing is, you know, I'm like looking at them. They got motorhome bigger than what I had at the Cup races. Their trailer's bigger than my Cup. And I'm like, I was like, you know, and I'm not trying to be mean about it, but I'm like, oh, so you have a couple $100 million? And they said, no. I said, oh, okay. I said, just by the looks of it, I said, they're like, you know, I've had multiple families like, we're spending everything we have right now. And I said, how old's your son or daughter? 12. I said, you're spending everything you have right now? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, stop.
That's your advice.
Stop, because you don't have enough to keep spending. I was like, what you need to do is make sure your child understands the marketing side of it and everything about that, because going back to the motocross side of it, talent doesn't make a huge difference anymore.
Right.
Yeah, you got to have some. But I'll tell you what, if you are so good on the marketing side of it that you can go to a company yourself and get the money, you'll have all the talent in the world. You'll make your own way.
Yeah.
And that's what the challenge of it is in motorsports right now is it's about the sponsor dollar, the marketing side of it, and how you make yourself stand out from the next person, because that next person over there, you put, you know, 100 and 1,000 or thousands of kids lined up. Talent-wise, for the most part, at the top level, they're all pretty close. Now there are people that are phenomenal and just
right.
You know, take a Max Verstappen in Formula One. That kid, that's a different level of talent.
Okay. It still exists even at that level every once in a while.
But for that 1%, there's also the next 30% that are all pretty much in the same realm.
Yeah.
So you got to make yourself stand out on the marketing side of it.
Yeah, well, it's tough because I think, and you can dig in here, I think people get confused because they're like, this guy brought a sponsor to the table and they assume that he comes from money or had money, and there are those stories for sure, but it also is like, no, part of the game is finding the money, making the money, bringing a sponsor. And there are stories, and again, people listening to this maybe don't know car racing well enough to know, like, a company will take a chance on like a 15-year-old or whatever and be like, you're our guy. We're going to bring you to the top. That does actually happen sometimes.
It does.
Yeah.
It's lesser and lesser now.
It's happened less. Even though you need it more, it's happening less.
Unfortunately, I would say in the NASCAR side of it, it's somewhat close in the sense of manufacturers find younger kids. Toyota's probably the best of it. You look at their list of drivers that they have found, and you can start at a guy like Eric Jones that, he made his story. He went out and beat Kyle Busch
straight up
at the Snowball Derby, and Kyle was like, "Wow, this kid is 16 and just beat me straight up. Nothing about it." Kyle put him in the trucks. Toyota took notice, said, "That's our guy." Christopher Bell's the same way. He comes from dirt track racing, phenomenal. Toyota's taking a notice of that. That's like, that's our guy. But in general...
So there is some still like, you have talent, we'll take care of you. Sometimes. But it's not always... No.
Sometimes. And it's unfortunately getting less and less in all forms of motorsports.
Okay, so how did you do it? Or was it different? I mean, we're not saying you're 50 years old, but was it that much different then? Or what were your parents doing? Were they spending every dime?
They mortgaged their house 3 times.
Shit!
Yeah, it was but at that point, I was very fortunate in the sense that I was right on, as we call the market in auto racing, and as sponsors were, especially. So this was in open wheel racing in 02, 03. When the 2 series were split, it was Champ Car, IRL. They were both struggling. At that point, NASCAR was kind of booming, but. I was just on the cut line of always being a step ahead of it, kind of the basically the mountain crumbling from under me.
It wasn't as risky as 3 mortgage. It seemed like you were going to be good. Is that what it was?
No, it was risky. No,
all right.
No, it was not risky for me. I was not putting the money up. My parents were, but I was very fortunate at that time because in Champ Car and just open wheel racing in general, there was not a lot of Americans. There was a Brazilian and European influx of money coming in that kids were able to bring money and buy rides. So the series needed young American stars, and I just was winning. I had to go out there and win, but I just kept getting opportunities. But it was 3 mortgages. My first car weekend ever. So I win a scholarship through Skip Barber called the National Series. 16 of the best karters in North America. They do a runoff. They pick 4. I hadn't been in a race car until I was 18 years old. Get in it, dominate.
You mean a race car? You had done other stuff, though.
You
said the quarter midgets.
Karting, but I had never been in a live race car.
Gotcha, okay.
So I dominate this runoff.
All right.
No doubt. I'm the guy. Boom.
Okay.
Going to my first weekend, same racetrack, Sebring, Florida.
Wow.
I crashed twice in 3 practices. My mom looked at me and said, "We're done. We're out of money."
You pretty much ruined us.
That was it. Like, my career was done in 3 practices. I'd crashed twice in 3 practices. My life's over. Racing, my mom's like, "We've maxed out everything. Can't fix it." And I was very lucky because the owner, the guy that had created Skip Barber himself, saw something in me, and I had some good people on my side that, let's just say, shifted the books a little bit to make sure I kept racing.
Yeah, that's a good story from AJ. Like I'm saying, in car racing, you just have to have luck sometimes to get in the equipment to get the ride, even if you have talent. We'll be back to this podcast in a moment. I want to remind you, Yoshimura-RD.com. That's our title sponsor, Yoshimura, 65 years of 4-stroke research and development. Also, we have an all-new issue of Racer X out October with, Eli Tomac on the cover. What's up with this cover curse? Our last cover had Marvin Musquin. Is Musquin sucking? Is he hurt? No. They're both fine. They were both on our last 2 covers. This cover of Racer X, I'm holding it right here. It says the hardest motos of summer. That is a reference to the feature story I wrote on the 3-race stretch between Southwick. There was also WW Ranch and Redbud. Those 3 races really changed the championship fortunes for many, such as Ken Roxon, Chase Sexton. I talked to a lot of riders and trainers about that grueling trio of races at midseason. Lots of great stuff in the new issue of Racer X. Go to racerxonline.com/subscribe or go to racerxonline.com/99cents. And you can get a really cheap 3-month subscription and check out our new digital edition of the magazine. I highly recommend it. Let's go back to the podcast with AJ.
So, go through that series, finished second in the championship by 1 point, actually won the championship outright on points, but in that series they had 2 throwaway races. Threw away your 2 best races, your worst 2 finishes.
Right.
I was on the Dungy plan where I didn't have any bad finishes. I never finished outside the top 5 in any of the races.
Okay.
So on throwaways, so because of that, the national championship got a full scholarship ride to the next series, which was called the Barber Pro Series. So they still have a runoff.
Yeah.
Second through 8. They go through a runoff. I'm going to go do that. I'm thinking, I'm going to dominate that runoff.
Yeah.
No problem. I go out there, crashing that.
No.
Toss that race car. Destroy it. I'm like, oh, God. My mom's like, well, you didn't win the runoff. We have no money. We're screwed.
Second time.
Once again, there's a couple of people in the company say we need to give him a scholarship on the side, on the DL. Woo. Do it. I go win that championship.
Okay.
At this point now, I'm like, what am I going to do in my life? All right. There's a series called the Twin Atlantic Series. It was the step below Champ Car.
Yeah.
There was a new owner, Carl Russo, was coming in, said he wanted to be the next Roger Penske. Well, actually, he would always say, we're not going to be Roger Penske. We're going to beat Roger Penske.
There we go.
I was like, yeah, okay. Anyway,
lots of those,
but he had a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
We do a runoff.
Yeah.
It was myself, Patrick Long, that was an American that had been in Europe for the last couple of years to go out there, and another close friend of mine, Brian Sellers, went out there, tubbed the race car, crashed it.
You did this again.
Did it again. Had a really problem with runoffs. Maybe trying just a touch too hard.
Do you know if that's what it was, or it just worked? Like, can you really put your finger on anything, or did it just work out that way?
Yeah, I was trying too hard and all.
You really were?
Yeah.
Because did you know at the time, like, dude, this is it?
This was it. I raced every lap like it was my last.
Right.
Because there was a very good chance that it was. Because if I didn't get that, we didn't have any money.
Right.
Crashed that car, destroyed it.
Oh my gosh.
I remember walking up to the team owner, and I'd known the other two. We weren't allowed to watch the other two guys, like the other guys run. But I didn't know how Pat would be. I knew Brian. I'd race against him. He was going to be solid. And he said to me, as I'm standing there in this Pueblo, Colorado powdery dirt covered from head to toe, because I exploded the car.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, like, wow, my life's over. I'm done now. And he said, well, what do you got to say for yourself? And he's very intimidating. I remember I thought, I have one shot to tell this guy something.
The right thing, yes.
And I said, yeah. I said, yeah, trying too hard again. I said, 3 years in a row. I said, but it'd be a horrible mistake you not choosing me. I said, you'd make the biggest mistake of your life. Now, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is going to go real bad when you say this. And he said...
That's like a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's all I had.
Right.
And I said, he said, yeah, really? How do you think that, as they towed my destroyed... not mine. His destroyed race car.
Yeah.
As I stood there covered in dirt. And I said, yeah, because I know the other two guys, they're solid. I said, you don't want to race against me. I said, I'll find another ride, and I will kick your ass every weekend and prove a point.
Bro!
And he said, really? I said, try it. And I walked away. And I thought,
oh my God.
And as I walked away, I hurried up and turned because I started crying. And hurried up and went to my rental car because I was done. And just started bawling because I was like, called my parents, said it's done. I don't have a ride, I'm done.
Yeah.
We're out of my, sorry.
Right.
Destroyed the car. Yep, 2 days later, he called me, said, we got the ride. And I said...
Over the other two guys, or they made room?
No, over the other two guys.
No shit.
And I said, well, thank you, sir. I very much appreciate that. I said, just out of curiosity, why?
Yeah.
They said, because we asked the team president, who do we not want to race against? And they said you. And I said, wow. So, yeah, there was some luck and some skill involved in me making where I got to.
Wow. Okay. Like, honestly, when you were saying those things, did you believe those things? Or were you just trying to come up with what to say? Because that's, in regular life, that's essentially the job interview that you just did. You've got one time in this dude's office to sell yourself. Did you believe that? Or were you like, I just got to come up with it? Or did you have that level of confidence? Or was this literally bullshitting your way in?
No, I full out bullshitted my way. Because there was not any other rides available. Because this was the only ride in the series at the time that somebody was actually going to get paid to drive for the most part. Right. Everybody else had to bring money.
Right.
And in that series, it was to run 12 races was like $1.2 million.
So you bring 1.2, you've got $1 million of sponsorship, you're losing $200,000 to go do it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it was a full bullshit, and that's why I started crying as soon as I turned around.
I mean, that's amazing. And I only want these stories to be told because, like, sometimes people complain on the moto side, like, dude, these four-strokes, they're so expensive, it's all about money. And it is about money to a degree. And in any sport, having resources helps. But you're literally saying there was literally no other option. You either get that ride or your career's over.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, you just pray. I didn't know what was going to happen next, and then fortunate enough that got the ride, won the championship, and it went on from there.
Okay, then, so how gnarly must the parents get? Hey, what's happening?
I'll take another one.
Yeah, we're rolling now. I'll take another. I'm just going to stick with what I got.
Okay.
Solid. Good recommendation here, too. On the moto side, everyone talks about the parents and how gnarly they are, and they are. They're all insane. It's practically required to be insane when you think of the sacrifices that you're making and how much you're putting your whole thing on the line. I would assume, I don't know about your parents, but you must know some parents, and maybe yours were too, that were insane. Because to that level of pressure, how could you not be?
Yeah, I mean...
Or most chill somehow?
No,
please. Okay.
Not my mom was always the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And she was to show the commitment level of what my mom was. She'd been, my parents have been together. I'm 37, so my parents have been together over 40 years. My mom would go to my dad all the races before I was born, all that.
Okay. Yeah.
But when we were karting, my dad and I would be talking setup stuff. My mom had no idea what we were talking about.
Right.
It really annoyed my mom. So she went to the library after the first year of karting and picked out all the engineering books, took my computer racing game books, and read everything so she understood engineering. She actually became the setup person on my go-kart for a lot of the years until the biggest ranks of karting that I got to.
Wow.
So my mom was always pretty chill. My dad, I mean, he was a karting dad, but...
Okay, there we go. So we have the term mini bike dad, and there's a term karting dad.
Karting dad, but he wasn't the worst.
Yeah.
I mean, he would... Now, there were definitely times that he was trying to fight other parents.
It's just par for the course.
My dad and Scott Speed's dad tried to fight several times. So, but he wasn't... I see some where... My parents were never... where they were, like, pushing me to do something I didn't want to do. Overbearing. Okay. Now, they always taught me no excuses.
Yeah.
If something happened on the racetrack, and if it was my fault, I got no excuses.
Okay.
They would call me out.
Yeah.
It's probably the way I'm kind of over the top. I'm always putting it on myself in general now, but they weren't overbearing about it. They always said, we're going to do everything we can for you to do this until you show you don't want to do it anymore. I just never showed that.
So, yeah, that's your parents. But, come on, man, to the karting dads. There's got to be.
Oh, God. Dude.
Because when you're talking triple mortgages and you need to bring $1.2 million to the table, like, I can't even imagine how insane you must have some of the gnarliest stories ever, the shit you saw.
Oh, I mean, to me, it's like no different than Little League. Like, it's just, like, yeah, they are just they are getting over the top. And really, to be truly honest, part of it is because as years go on, the money that's getting spent in karting. Like I talk to parents that are spending $300,000-$400,000 in karting for a year.
And this is at like what age?
This is 12 years old, 13 years old.
Yeah. So you're in for $1 million real quick.
Yeah.
By 12 to 15, you've spent $1 million.
And every dad, thinks it's their kid's the next Michael Schumacher.
You know what I think hurts even more? Okay, so I was doing Xfinity. I was doing K&M in 2014, 2015. I went to a lot of them. And they were all, this is a crazy theory, so tell me if I'm crazy or maybe I'm onto something. There were all these kids who were like 16, 17 years old. And a lot of them are pretty solid now, like William Byron's in there.
Yep.
Austin Hill, who's up front of the trucks. They were all around the same age. And I was like, you know what? All these kids are the exact same age as the years NASCAR blew up. Like mid to late 90s. They were all born in that span. So it made me wonder if there were all these parents that started seeing gold, like NASCAR is huge, they're all millionaires, they fly private planes, we're going for it. And then they found out, well, there's still only 20 or 30 that make it, not 400. That was my theory. They saw, when you watch the top level of either Michael Schumacher or Jeff Gordon, you're like, that's it. That's going to be us. We're going to make $100 million. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's kind of the way that it is. It's, and that's what I try to describe to people. And moto's the same way. I mean, how many factory rides are there? 10?
Right. They all think they're going to be Roxon or Tomac.
Yeah.
And there's only a handful. And
that's what I always try to explain to everybody is the fact that motorsports in general, in every form of it, I don't care what form it is, 2 wheels or 4 wheels, in whatever series you want to talk about at the top level, there's only 10 to 20 quality rides.
Yep.
And at most, there's 40 professionals that get to do it.
Yeah, pretty much.
In Formula One, there's 20 professionals. In IndyCar, there's 23, 22 professionals that get to do it full time. It's not football. There's not 53 on a team. It's not basketball where there's 12 on a team with 30 teams. Baseball, 25 players per team over 30.
Yep.
So there's a lot of talent that gets lost in the cracks.
Okay, so what they're telling me now is, with this iRacing, which is, we'll talk about how realistic it is in a second. Most people are going to make fun and be like, a freaking video game? But some people are thinking, like, this might actually be good in a way, because it's so, and we're not talking the video games on PlayStation, we're talking about the simulator game, that's so realistic that some people think it might help in a way, because you can start to identify talent, and it costs hardly any money, a couple $1,000s to build a setup in your house. Do you think that might actually really change it in any way?
I don't know if teams are going to look at Sim Racer. You know what? As it blows up, possibly. It may.
Yeah.
But you never know until a kid gets out of a chair that doesn't move.
Right.
And gets into a real live race car.
Yeah.
And sees how he does. Now, there are some. William Byron, that's how he started, iRacing.
Blows my mind.
Started iRacing and said, pretty good at it. Like, I'm going to try to get in cars and got the feel of it. There's other guys that are the best sim racers in the world that can get in a race car and have no feel for it.
So has that happened? Really good guys have tried it?
I'm sure there has.
Yeah,
it's hard to tell because it is so different in that sense. It's such a feel thing. But, talent's talent in one way or another.
These games are that, hey, thank you, realistic though, where we're rolling. Yep. The games are realistic, and again, I'm not talking PlayStation, I'm talking about a simulator game. You're saying you can even tell the setup of the car, even though you're not actually in a freaking car. It's pretty close.
Yeah, for sure, and that's when I got to NASCAR racing, because it was like open wheel racing to NASCAR was almost like learning how to walk again. It was so different.
Yes.
And setups, stuff that you would do on an IndyCar engineering-wise was not what you would do on a NASCAR to a certain extent. So I would go. At the time, iRacing wasn't out, but there were still some really solid computer games, and I would go and run laps and just do setup stuff to understand what that was.
Right.
So I could feel taking wedge out of the car. Okay, what does that feel like? What does that even do? Like, all that stuff. So, the setup stuff is fairly accurate. the way the tracks, especially on iRacing, because they're all laser cut, they're so close to being dead on. The one thing I will always tell people, I laugh, I said, how close is it, AJ? I said, it's pretty close. I said, you want to make it as realistic as possible? They said, sure. I said, is your computer anywhere by a wall in your house? Well, no, not really, no. I said, okay, all right. I said, move your computer, any wall you want, whatever you want, just set your computer. Okay. I said, do you wear a helmet? No. I said, put a helmet on.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, I'll put a helmet on. I said, when you hit the wall and crash, I said, you slam your head against the side of the wall of your house as hard as you can, because that hurts. And you can be Superman on a simulator and come dive bombing it in the corner with no repercussions except hit and escape and going to do it again, compared to slamming your head against a wall and trying to figure out what your name is when you're done. And so there's always going to be, it's never going to be perfectly the same.
I'm glad you brought that up, because on the moto side, I said, like, the advantage is the money's not as big. The disadvantage is the danger is, you're going to get hurt. It's just going to happen. So I've always wondered that. Like, kart racing has come a long way, especially in the NASCAR side, has become much safer. Haven't had a fatality in a long time. Open wheel's still pretty gnarly, but better than it was. It's still not that idiot-proof, though. Like, when you crash, it still hurts. It does still hurt.
Oh, yeah.
You might be, he's walking out of the infield care center. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. You're okay, but it freaking hurts.
NASCAR racing's, they've done such a good job between the safety, just between the safer barriers, that all this. IndyCar racing, it's inherently just more dangerous.
Yeah.
That's not bad. They're doing everything they can to make it safer.
It's just the type of car they're in. Yeah.
Especially on a super speedway.
Yeah.
I mean, wheels touch. It's an open wheel car, and they even close the wheels somewhat.
Yep.
But cars get up in the air, and it's just there's not as much mass. So the driver's going to take more force from it.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah.
But when you hit the wall, even in a stock car, when that moment's like, dude, I'm hitting the wall, you're like, this is gonna hurt.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
it's you hit a ton, and you just it takes your breath away, and you're just like. But I mean, it's definitely gotten safer.
But I think it's key to know that it's gotten safer. You're not hurt per se, like where you need to go to the hospital, but it still hurts.
Yeah. But that's the thing with motocross and supercross. Like, how safe can you make it? Like,
There's not much you can do.
I mean, the rider is still going to hit hard dirt when he lands.
Oh, yeah.
And the speeds of these motorcycles now, and the bigger jump, especially at the Supercross and even motocross, but the Supercross races, and that's why, to me, I always tell people, because people are like, man, you're crazy. You race cars for a living? I mean, that's scary. I'm like, yeah, go watch a two-wheel race. I don't care if it's MotoGP, Superbike, motocross.
Let's talk about flat track, bro.
Flat track. I mean,
nuts.
Yeah, it's two-wheel that no matter what you do, the body's going to take the punishment when it lands.
Good point. Yes.
So, maybe when I was 5 years old, and even in the back of my mind, I always wanted to be that Supercross rider. But I see the way some of those guys walk now, and I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, that's right. You're still playing golf all the time, and you're okay. Okay, so you made your way through. Look, you mentioned that transition from IndyCar to NASCAR. Most fail at it. Most do. So what is the huge difference? Because honestly, there's been some serious talent that has come over, and it almost never works out. You did pretty good. You did win a race. Why is that so hard?
It's just, I mean, it's, how long is this podcast? It's such a different car to drive.
Yeah.
And I've never ridden I've ridden motocross bikes.
Yeah.
I've never ridden a MotoGP bike. I've never ridden a flat track bike.
Okay.
So I don't know the differences of jumping from one to the next. But you jump from an Indy car, and the easiest way to put it, almost in like the Days of Thunder's terms, it's like you get in an Indy car that's got 1,500 pounds.
Yeah.
These big tires, ton of downforce.
Yep.
Big brakes, Yeah. And now you get in a stock car with these skinny tires, weighs 3,400 pounds, no downforce. They slide around. And it's like you get in it and you're like, what am I driving? Like it's like the car's moving around, it's sliding, you know, and an Indy car on an oval, if the thing slides a little bit, you're scared to death. Like
it's not supposed to do that.
Like, okay, nah, let's fix this. Like, I ain't doing that anymore. Right. Stock car, thing sideways, it's like, well, can I drive it even more loose and go fast? Like, that's how it's supposed to drive. Like, and it's just hard to get used to it, let alone how you race, how you make a 500-mile race and last at a place like Darlington where you run 2 inches off the fence all night. Yeah. Like, there's so many differences about it, and I mean, I can look at it that, of course, I'd love to have had more wins and more success, but, I mean, it's just, I stayed in it for 13 years.
Yeah, I feel like for crossing over, you're about as high a level as anyone that was able to do it.
Robbie Gordon, I said, was probably one of the best ones at it.
Okay.
He got some wins.
Yeah.
You know, Juan was, Ganassi, when Juan was there, had some up and down years. The middle sector of him being there, Ganassi was at a great level, and Juan should have won Indy at least once, if not twice.
He had a couple speeding penalties that cost him here and there.
A couple of there were some races where Juan could have won. He only got the wins on the road courses, but Juan is legendary. I mean,
he's super talented.
The dude's won the Indy 500, won at Monaco, won the Rolex 24, won Cup races. I mean, it's he's one of the legends. Still to this day in IMSA can wheel the hell out of a race car. So, I mean, it's tough because it goes back to that. I always push myself to be at the best and always say, not what if, because I think everything happens for a reason, but I always wanted more. I wanted to be the best all time. And I always look at my Cup career and be like, man, I could have done this better. God, if I would have got. But at the end of the day, then I got to try to bring myself back down to kind of normal and say, walk upstairs and I got a Rolex. I have Champ Car wins. I have a Cup win. I have Xfinity wins. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to be better than most.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the whatever, 0.5%, 1%, or whatever. For just to be making a living racing, for starters, and then to have a couple of wins. Okay, yes, you mentioned sports car racing, which is a whole nother thing. Kelly Stavist, who's our pit reporter now for NASCAR, she used to be a pit reporter with me in motocross. She'd be like, you don't understand, when you go to a sports car race, they have designated parking areas. It's not for the Packers fans and the Bears fans. It's for the Ferrari fans who all drive Ferraris.
Oh, yeah.
And the Porsche fans who all drive Porsches. She's like, you don't understand the people, the socioeconomic group that comes to these races. So I'm talking Le Mans or 24-hour Daytona. That's the type of race I'm talking about here. I want to talk money. That's an insane thing. And talk about this factor of the rich guys are part of the actual racing. Explain how this works. It's probably insane to people to think this. They're on the field. They're in the race.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's starting to get away from that a little bit. As
is that unfortunately or is that fortunately?
Well, I think it's sports car racing. Inherently, to a certain degree, is always been that, and we call them gentleman drivers. Gentleman drivers are those guys that want to become race car drivers, and they're business guys that always have the passion for racing, and it was kind of built on the fact that, you know, you'd get a star and you'd get this gentleman guy and they'd team up and the guy would help fund the team. And, well, sports car racing now has kind of gotten more manufacturer-based and more competitive, where as we talk about all these young guys trying to find their dream is Formula One. Well, there's 20 Formula One rides. And probably 8 to 10 of them are guys that bring money.
Okay.
Well, where's that 22-year-old that doesn't have the money, can't get into Formula One? Well, what's he going to go do now? Well, manufacturers, the Porsches, the Audis, Mazda. It's all these different types, all these big manufacturers. They start taking these guys and signing them up, and they start sports car racing. So that's kind of where sports car racing...
So it's actually a better time right now. It's actually a pretty good time to be a driver in that.
Yeah, but just like motocross, you know, there's only so many manufacturer rides.
That's right.
And now you're starting to lose that gentleman driver that would help fund the team, and there's less opportunities. But yeah, anybody that's listening to this that is just a car fan, you got to go to the Rolex 24-hour race, because it literally is. You drive into the inside of Daytona, and you drive past the Porsche Club.
Yeah.
You drive past the Ferrari Club.
Yeah.
The Aston Martin Club. The Chevy Club. It's all the way down through the whole racetrack is your club. It's a clique. It's like a high school clique with really cool cars.
Yeah, and I think, so I now take to Supercross every year, and I'm like, hey, I should come for the 500 one year. And they're like, no. Come for the 24-hour. There is nothing more fun in racing than a 24-hour sports car race. As a fan, you're kind of paying attention a little bit. It's pretty much a 48-hour-long party, partying before, during, and after. So you've done this. You've won it. You did it even this year. How the hell do you do it? Like, do you sleep? Do people sleep? How does that work?
My first year was 2006. I've done all these with my close friend, my brother, Michael Shank, for his team. Yeah. I've done I've done it every year except 1 year. I needed a break. Yeah. He was switching. He'd always been in the prototype class, which is the fastest class. He'd switched to the GT cars, which are basically the cars that look like we're on the street.
Yeah.
And I just needed a break that year. It's a Acura-based team. They wanted their Honda guys in the car. Yeah. But I've done it from 06 to 2019 every year with them except for 1 year.
Okay.
We probably should have about 7 Rolexes. Been leading with 2 hours to go. It's caught on fire. Had a minute and a half lead, and the car broke. Right rear suspension broke. I mean, every way we could lose it, we've lost.
Right.
We've got one, so we at least got one. But
you didn't lose the watch.
I still have the watch.
Okay. All right.
But it was my first year. I mean, I was 24, I think, the first year I did it.
Yeah.
And never done any type of sports car race. Never shared a car with anybody. It was all open wheel racing. Is you don't let anybody in your seat. Stock car racing, I don't want anybody in my seat. Yeah. Sports car racing, you got to put your egos aside if you really want to be a good team.
Right.
And for the betterment of the team, everybody's got to work together, because you want your teammate just as fast, if not faster than you, because that means the team's fast.
That's true. Right.
So I've always had a good group around me. It was always Oswaldo Negri, which in Skip Barber was one of my driver coaches.
Oh, wow.
John Pugh, which was the gentleman driver of the team.
Okay.
And worked really hard at the craft. And for the most part, I was always teamed up with my longtime friend, Justin Wilson, that passed away in 2015 at Pocono. And but my first year, 24, I was the young guy bouncing off the walls. I think I drank like probably... I'm not kidding. It's probably sad to say. At least 16 to 17 Red Bulls by the time the race had ended. We were so fast. We're leading. I'm like, oh my God, we're leading this thing.
Yeah.
And I had this fear that if I fell asleep, they'd come knock on the door and the car had broke and I was done. So I drank enough Red Bull to felt like I was the good luck charm for the car not to break because I didn't fall asleep.
Wait. You thought if you fell asleep, that would lead to potential bad luck for the team.
Pretty much. So
they needed you to rest, bro.
Yeah, I didn't rest. And made a huge mistake because I was the final driver. We finished second, and then I violently cramped up after the race.
You wonder why?
Shocker. Yeah. And so from 06 to 19, I've tried to work on sleeping better.
Okay.
Which I'd done a pretty good job of until 2019 when I decided to start working for NBC and NBC
double
Sports.
duty. Yeah.
And I had to call the race and do the race at the same time.
So were you able, let's say we'll pick a random year like 2013 or 14, you were actually able to sleep at some point? Like, what do? You go to a motorhome and try to... Look, dude, I just drove 6 hours back from Budds Creek going 65 miles an hour. And when I got home, you can't just immediately... So what the hell is that like?
It's difficult because... Yeah. Say that most of the time on the team, there's 4 drivers. So you do hour and a half to 2 hour stints. So you think about, by the time you get out of the car, there's 3 there's one getting in, and then there's 2 drivers in front of you.
So that's 6 hours, right?
Well, the team always wants the driver that's following the guy in the car to be there pretty much when he gets in the cart. Because it's a 24-hour race. There's times drivers get sick and they have to come out.
I see.
So it's tough. You really only have like a 3-hour rest period.
Yeah.
So you got to get out of the car, get calmed down, try to sleep for a little bit, and then wake yourself back up. So it's a fine line. The year we won was they did the strategy perfect. I'd gotten out of the car at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And, you don't really talk. You kind of tell the engineer, okay, this is what the car's doing. You go back to your bus.
Yeah.
You don't really have a lot of communication with the team because race is still going just because you're out.
Yeah.
So I'd always kind of calculate, okay, I'm going to try to get back in, set my alarm. Well, Michael Shank, the team owner, said, you know what? We want you, the max you can drive at one time, a driver is 3.5 hours straight or 4 hours in a 6-hour period. So he said, can you make the last 3.5 hours? I said, yeah, I'll be good. Mm-hmm. Said, so we're going to rest you until then.
Yeah.
So I basically skipped a rotation.
Okay.
So that year I actually got a good bit of 3-4 hours of sleep. I don't know if it's a good bit of sleep, but enough to go out there. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like it's a difficult thing, especially when you're running good. If you're running like crap, you're like, I don't care. I don't care if I sleep through my stint, whatever. Like,
But you don't want to be the guy that blows it if you're up front.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're learning is there's just, I mean, dude, I don't care. My guy down the street from me is like, I got a spec Miata and I had to pay $8,000 for an engine that's slower than a stock Miata because those are the rules. We got to run this restrictor plate, and that's just how it works. Kart racing is just freaking expensive. And then that's just to build the car, and then every set of tires and every set of brakes and every engine and gearbox, like, kart racing is just expensive. So as fun as it is there a slot in there for, like, I don't know if it's a Miata or if it's these quarter midgets, late models. Is there a slot for people that just want to have fun? Or is it like it's going to cost you a decent amount of money? Or you're just rando dude, can you find some local short track stuff and just have a good time with it?
The pavement stuff's tough.
Really?
I would say...
And why is that? Does pavement just wear stuff out more?
Just the rules, tires. Like, you know, the series really has to do a good job to set base rules to make sure that it's not over the budget. And that's up to the series and the tracks.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, I don't think they do a great job of it. And it just trickles, I don't know if it's the trickle up effect or the trickle down effect.
Right.
I don't know if it's because everything's so expensive up top.
Yeah.
That sucks everything up to it. Like, well, like we all got to be expensive.
Right.
Whatever it may be, it's just not. It's tough to go have fun. You know, like karting. I can go out there and try to have fun in karting. I did my so the big karting race here in the U.S. is called the Super Nationals. It's been going since '96 in Vegas.
Okay.
I think my first year was '97.
Yeah.
And you know, I used to show up when I drove for Paul Tracy. We'd show up in a box van. We thought we were badass box van. Roll that thing up, man. We had carts on the wall. We're like, oh yeah, we're big time. Yeah. My last Super Nationals, I came back and did a couple of them, was 2014.
2014.
Yeah.
You were like super established. You've like won races at the highest level.
I was like, yeah, okay, come back and do some karting. Yeah. For one weekend, for that race, I spent $24,000 of my own money.
Good Lord. And that wasn't the whole budget. That's just what you spent.
That's what I spent. I spent $24,000 of my own money to go win a race that paid $2,000.
How'd you do?
I got crashed in the main. So I'm not even counting the $24,000 that it had to fix the go-kart that I destroyed.
After.
So, point being, it's hard to go find stuff sometimes to go have fun. I do think dirt racing is not bad at it right now. I look at a lot of people and I never dirt raced. I always thought I would because that's what we'd always go out to.
Yeah.
My dad dirt raced.
Yeah.
I love the World of Outlaw sprint cars. We'd always go do it. And I'm okay right now. You?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
But you go to the local dirt tracks, and it sounds like the right divisions and the right tracks, they do it at a decent cost.
That's what it all comes down to, dude. You're literally weighing safety versus cost. Motorcycle racing is cheaper, but it's way more dangerous, and that's literally the decision that you're making. I don't know. There's obviously not breaking your leg. or getting paralyzed like that kid in a quad, there is no price you can put on that. So I guess you could see what leads people down certain paths, but good Lord. And by the way, I think most people will be like, yeah, by the way, you work harder as a motocross racer, and you do from a physical side, but when you're at the elite level of Cup or IndyCar, you're freaking putting in work, right?
Oh,
like, you're
yeah.
not just chilling Monday through Thursday,
No, I mean,
right?
it's... I hate when people see motorsports in general and be like,
yeah, the car does all the work.
You're not working that hard. In a Cup car, there's certain tracks like Bristol, place like that, Martinsville, because you're always on the brakes and off the brakes.
Yeah.
That physically are Darlington's physically demanding.
So, like after the race or the day after, are you like smoked?
Certain races, but where Cup racing's difficult is the heat. In the mid summer, I mean, there's races where I've had the car inside at 100. Well, the hottest I ever saw inside of my race car was 192.
What?
Yeah, and that. So, on the Cup side of it, and just in stock cars in general, that's where it's challenging. The races are long.
Yeah.
And during the summer months especially, it is brutally hot. I mean, just like I went to blurred vision during a race. Like, there's several races where I'm in there just going, like, starting to throw up. Like, oh my God, it's so hot. Yeah. And then all of a sudden your body just shuts down and goes to chills, which is scary.
Boy. Oh yeah.
So that's what's hard about NASCAR is the heat. Physically, there like I said, there are races you can wear yourself out, but I'd say out of a 36 race schedule, I'd mark off maybe 8 to 10 where you're like physically that's gonna be a challenge.
I see.
But there's about 20 heat wise. You're like, holy moly!
Yeah.
I may just melt down in here completely. Indy cars and sports car racing, those are physically.
Is that just because the G-forces braking and cornering is so much more impressive of them that you're just taking that load?
You an Indy car, the braking force, when you hit the brakes, it's 4 Gs forward, throttle back. On an oval, at a fast oval, like Indy or a place like Texas where the banking's really high. I mean, it's a constant 4G spike through the corners. Right. So physically on the body, IndyCar and sports car racing can be kind of the same way. But motocross riders, man, that's a different level sometimes.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's as fit gets. But even the schedule, can you like chill out, or is it like you need to be in the shop or be in a meeting, or are you just like, hey, dude, good race Sunday, we'll see you Thursday?
No, I mean NASCAR's tough because there's so many races. It's every week. Right. So yeah, I mean you get home Sunday night at 10 p.m. You're probably in the shop Monday, debriefing. Okay. And that's certain weeks you're gone for sponsors, you're flying to do stuff. Yeah. There's certain weeks you're not, but Cup racing's hard because it's hard when it's good, let alone if you're struggling.
Okay.
And that's where the mental grind, it's just like every week you're going to a place, and as I said, I mean, I've been in those spans of where everything's dialed in, you're like, let's go next weekend. Yeah. And then I've been in many a times where you're struggling, you're like, oh my God, like we're doing this again. Will this ever end? Right. Please let it end. Right. And that's the funny part. They get to the playoffs and they're like, all right, stretch run, season's almost over. You're like, that's 2.5 months. That's 10 races.
That's right.
Stretch run is 2.5 months to Thanksgiving, basically. Yeah. And then you get December, you basically get a 2-week period. Christmas, January 1, they're like, all right, let's dial it up again. And here we go.
That's freaking insane. So I guess my whole point of this is it's not glory on any side. All sides are hard. They all have their drawbacks. No one's like sitting on easy street.
There's always that person waiting in line that wants to do it. Yep. And the one thing that I still love about Supercross and Motocross is it still and just two wheels in general, it still comes down to more talent. I don't want to say it in four-wheel racing has nothing to do with talent.
Right.
But going back to all the sponsorship and stuff, some of the best opportunities out there, the best talent don't get it.
Yeah.
At least in two-wheel racing. It still seems like Adam Cianciarillo. Yeah,
he's just good, dude.
He's had some ups and downs and some injuries, but he's still good. Austin Faulkner, he's pretty badass.
Yeah.
And, you see all those young guys that come up through the ranks and they make a splash, whether it's in 125s or, hell, when they're on mini bikes, 80s and stuff.
Yeah.
You all of a sudden see it and watch them go through the ranks.
Yeah.
It's nice. That's what I still love about it. And that's, in four-wheel type of racing, it's tough. At the top level, the best are still the best,
right.
but some of the younger talent don't get noticed because of that, or some of the talent that's even there get kind of run over because maybe the next guy's got some money or a Lincoln,
better car
or something.
Yeah.
And that's what you and me talk about it all the time. I'm like, Ricky Carmichael in his heyday, could he win on a stock bike? It'd be a challenge. Still probably a bet on it though. Like it would have been
right. There's no asterisk where you're like, well, but he had this.
Yeah.
You just knew he was the baddest dude. It was totally black and white. He was the baddest dude, and you never had to qualify it with, but what if?
And that's
the car, the team.
And that's why I'm so drawn to it, because the badass guys are going to show their badass no matter what bike they're on.
Right.
And sure, maybe a Kawasaki this year's better than a Honda.
Right.
Such and such, the Suzuki needs to get better, whatever.
Right.
But I'm going to tell you right now, you go put Eli Tomac on anything, he's going to be fast. You go put Ken Roczen on anything, he's going to be fast. Now, maybe does it suit his style quite as much?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
But
he's not going to not make it in the sport because of that level of difference.
Eli Tomac or Ken Roczen aren't going to switch colors and go run 15th now.
No. Yeah.
Especially
you've been through that.
Especially in NASCAR.
Yeah.
IndyCar's done a good job to try to level the playing field.
Yeah.
Team Penske's still Team Penske.
Right.
Their cars are still awesome.
Yep.
Ganassi, Andretti, they're still. But you know what? Like, you can take Sebastian Bourdais at Aim Vassar Sullivan, one of the lower teams, and if he's right that day, the talent's going to show and he can win. Cup racing, it's not as black and white with that. It's, you can get in. Is Kyle Busch one of the best? And the way he drives, maybe one of the... You can argue, and everybody's going to have their heyday. No, Dale Sr., Richard Petty.
Yeah.
But there's no argument that Kyle Busch isn't one of the, at least the 10 best drivers ever.
Yeah.
With everything he wins in, trucks, Xfinity, Cup.
Yep.
Could Kyle Busch get in a 25th place car and go win with it in Cup? Nope.
Right.
Now, can he get that 25th place car maybe to 18th? I think he can.
Right.
But he's not going to go win with that car. And that's what's hard about NASCAR in general, but in motorsports to a certain degree.
Yeah, so that's our show with AJ Allmendinger. Love that conversation to hear how it works. If you want more insight from AJ, let's see. You can listen to our American Flat Track shows. You can watch the IMSA Sports Car Championship on NBCSN. You can watch NASCAR America and the NASCAR Motorsports Hour on NBCSN. You can check out their IndyCar Racing. They throw him in for some pre- and post-race shows on NASCAR. The guy does a lot. He knows a lot. Our ongoing joke is, I've got so many racing series in my head. I think I do a lot. Amazing to stay on top of that. And most of those series have multiple classes, too. So I don't quite know how he does it, but it leads to a lot of knowledge, and I thank him for giving us an hour of that knowledge on this show. By the way, one other point I want to make. We talked about at the very end, IndyCar's done a good job leveling the playing field. I hear all the time fans say, oh, just have some regulations, take money out of it, do things like that. For example, on the motocross side, why do they have work spikes? Why do they have work suspension? What you'll find out is when you plug one hole to try to cover the budget in racing, a team will just spend it somewhere else. Most privateers will tell you work suspension is good, but the work suspension guy, the full-time salaried, highly credentialed, highly experienced suspension guy is what really makes that suspension work. So, yeah, they might have the components that you can't get, but even if you got them, the personnel is still the difference for the top teams. And how are you going to restrict that? How are you going to hurt that? So, as I was alluding to at the end of the podcast, you can make rules in NASCAR to make the cars less expensive to build, but you can't stop Joe Gibbs Racing if they have a better sponsor from hiring 3 more genius engineers to develop a widget that no one else can come up with. And that's actually the conundrum that NASCAR is in right now. For the last couple of years, drivers have been asking NASCAR to remove downforce from the cars. Downforce is the wind pushing the car into the track to make it handle better. The drivers don't want that because they feel if the car handles worse, the driver can make a bigger difference in the results. The problem is, if you cut down on the amount of downforce, it makes the car hard to drive. If an engineer can come up with some way to even get a little bit of it back, it's going to be a massive difference. And thus, the playing field becomes unleveled. So they tried that for a few years. Around 2015 or so, they removed a lot of downforce from the cars. The teams and drivers were super pumped. They thought it was awesome. And after a few months, and certainly after a few years, teams figured out how to game that system. It's all part of car racing, gaming the system. It's not as important in motocross because the bike doesn't make as much of a difference. But in car racing, you gain 2% downforce with something you did in the wind tunnel, some bending of the metal that's hard to detect. You're going to win races. So that's the problem NASCAR had. So they switched to the other direction now. They put a ton more downforce into the car. So at least the advantage that you can gain is negated. The whole point of this story is regulations in motorsports are really hard. We're pretty lucky on the motocross side that the money isn't quite as big a factor when it comes to the equipment. It's not like one team just has more money than the other, and that's why they dominate. The athlete is still important. The bikes only matter so much. Motocross is pretty much the ultimate, except for one problem. You get injured. It's the whole thing. That is the entire other side of the scale, the injuries. So it's a lot safer to get into car racing because you have a cage. As AJ said, the crashes do hurt. But let's be honest, the chances of breaking a bone or ending up in a wheelchair are tremendously remote compared to motocross. It does happen. It absolutely does happen in car racing. But motocross, the nicks and knacks and torn ACLs and wrist problems, it's just going to happen. But so many other things are great. I don't know. I would say the closest I can think of to having the perfect mix right now is maybe MotoGP. That maybe has the best combination of good racing, the rider makes a difference, but still having technology where it doesn't feel like it's over-regulated. There's still some creativity. Injuries are there, but it's not ridiculous level. Usually the best rider wins, not just the rider that doesn't get hurt. Maybe they have the best combination, but that might just be because I'm the least plugged into that scene. There's probably all sorts of things that people wish were better in MotoGP also. I don't know, motorsports, it's fascinating. I love talking about it. Glad you enjoyed it, and thanks to Yoshimura for bringing this to you. Yoshimura-rd.com. Same exhaust that Tim Geiser won another world championship with. Check out the October issue of Racer X. And just keep us tuned in. We'll have more podcasts coming. We got the finale, the Stasic Ironman National this weekend. I'm going to try to get Ryan Ragland, the founder of Stasic, on the phone. Or I might see him this weekend. We'll see. Would love to talk about those little electric motorcycles. My son has one. Trying to save the industry there, folks. We're going to go from the top of the racing to the very ground stages. So stay tuned for future podcasts here on Racer X. Thanks for listening.